joints which are starting to become stiff, and we've got cartilage that's actually starting to degrade. So it's a degradation process. Conditions that require you to build the client up and will require significant lifestyle changes, particularly diet, exercise, etc., it's going to therefore be very important for you to support the self-degradation which the client is going through and which the client is perpetuating in their core structure. It's going to be very important for you to be able to work with this at more than just a physical level. Even just saying the word degradation, you can immediately notice what does it conjure up for you, what kind of sensations and feelings. It's going to be a person who's inherently struggling with their sense of self-worth, with building themselves up from the core, with feeling like they are enough, they are sufficient, they are supported, they are structurally sound. This is a very deep identity consciousness. It's not necessarily only pertaining to lifestyle factors. You will have to explore the trauma history of the client. It's not that it's impossible to reverse or slow down, but conditions like this require holistic change and quite radical change. So yes, you can do work to build up and support the actual reformation of tissue and support the fluidic flow around joints, etc. But if the person themselves doesn't want to change the way that they move their body, or doesn't want to change particular lifestyle habits, etc., it is going to compete with the work that you do. Recognize the holistic factors that are contributing to this client's condition. And something like osteoarthritis doesn't develop, as I said, overnight. It happens from prolonged degradation of self. Most of the time you'll notice symptoms in the extremities. So it will be the knees, it will be the hands. Sometimes in extreme cases you might notice in the hips. But by the time osteoarthritis has really reached and started to manifest in the hip joints, it's already going to be there in the knees. You may also notice in the cervical spine evidence of osteoarthritis. When you are working with this, you want to support as much as you can fluidic flow, because that is what is going to support the repair and the healing. And often there is impaired fluidic flow and there is quite a severe dehydration of the system. So the more you can work to support fluidic flow, the better it will be. There are obviously factors that can predispose people to degenerative conditions such as osteoarthritis, including gender. It's more common in women, including obesity, because it puts more strain on the actual joints themselves. Psychological factors, where a person really hasn't had a chance in life to build themselves up, so to build up a connection with their body, for example, that teaches them how to actually use their body, or to allow them to tune into the feedback mechanism that's happening all the time when it comes to how the body is positioned and situated in space. So when these connections haven't been nurtured and haven't been supported, and a person has very much been living from the mind, disconnected from the body, you are going to find the increased prevalence of these types of conditions. Some of the symptoms that you'll notice are mostly to do with mobility. There will be, over time, more and more restriction on mobility because of the stiffness in the joints. So you can imagine it becomes much harder to do things that require the joint to move in really any direction, but things like walking up the stairs, for example, that can actually put so much pressure on the joints that the spine starts to compensate. So you can imagine usually there's like a forward motion where the spine will start to bend and the person will almost be hunched over because they're trying to support themselves with these knee joints and hip joints that are now really degenerated and fragile and don't feel strong enough to support the body. So there's this kind of lack of trust. So rather than being upright, the person is going to start moving into the ground. They're going to start moving in forward, and that puts pressure on the whole spine, and you will see the whole spine starting to compensate and starting to curve. Just because osteoarthritis affects the joints, it doesn't mean you're not going to notice spinal effects and spinal repercussions. There will be impact on the spine, and you will have to work with the whole person. Because of this degeneration, this inherent sense of inner self-degradation, the experience of and the symptoms of osteoarthritis are quite similar to the symptoms of something like gout, again affecting the joints of the body, the places where we are supposed to be fluidic and mobile and transitioning and moving and supported, but supported in a movement. It's very, very important aspects and parts of our body that store a lot of energy and trauma are the joint. So when you start to notice this inherent degradation in a person and the similarities between conditions like osteoarthritis and gout, when you tune in to the visceral level, you're going to come to the kidneys and the liver, feeling into the kidneys and the level of stress and shock that is being held in the kidneys that is unprocessed. This is really going to be also key to supporting the harmonization and balance of the inner chemistry of the body. You can only do so much repair to cartilage, right? You can only rebuild cartilage to a certain degree before the actual body of the person itself needs to start awakening to its own regenerative capacity and to its own regenerative potential. If a person is very attached to the label of osteoarthritis, for example, and to the concept that they have a degenerative disease that there is no cure for, you're going to find it much more challenging than a person who hasn't received a diagnosis and is completely unaware. Because by the time the psyche has absorbed this notion of beyond repair, it's already working in that frequency. I'm beyond repair. The body will say, I can't mobilize resources to heal this cartilage and these joints or to reduce inflammation. It's the thought as well. It's the belief systems that also impact the neurochemistry of the body. What we believe about ourselves is having a direct effect on the body's capacity to heal and repair. And in degenerative conditions, they are very heavy when it comes to the label, the conditioning, and the corresponding consciousness structures that go with that.